You're about to hear a pretty wild story, but I have to tell you up front, there are adult themes in this story. I've tried to keep it as ungraphic as possible, but there's parts of the story that have to be a little bit graphic, having to do with sex. So I have to let you know up front that this video isn't made for children. I should also let you know that it's a long story. And for that reason, I've added chapters. If you put your mouse cursor over the timeline right below me, you'll see a timeline pop up with chapters. And if you go across, you can read little descriptions of what each chapter is. Feel free to skip around if that works better for you. And last but not least, I'm going to start this video with a poem. A poem? Are you crazy? Most poems are stupid. Hey, no, listen, I agree with you. Most poems are stupid, but this one isn't. In fact, this is a sexy poem, and I wrote it right around the same time period. It captures the emotional quality of the experience I'm about to tell you. You could consider it to be sort of like mood lighting, putting on some slow jazz just to set the tone. If you don't like poems, you can always skip ahead. But I think you'll like this poem. Half sick of shadows, but the Leviathan consumes its prey. Days play in and out, tired reruns, the story of my life. Hidden by the neighbor's house, a woman laughing. Yearning to be the train that breaks the track, the little engine that could becomes a rocket, laughing at gravity, burning its rational straitjacket in white-hot atmosphere. 1,000 days and nights have passed, but I smell your fragrance at the garden gate. Katydids circle the porch light, these familiar limbs of mine, and two eyes, the taste of beer, cold in my throat, the smell of tobacco, old as a summer night. In the dark of the garden, desire's shadow. My eyes glistening wet like yours, spilling tracks of moonlight like yours to the cut of your jaw, your hair fresh, your breath sweet like summer hay. You move through the yard like a ghost, staying close inside the shadows, your laugh as faint as memories. You are familiar. Do I know you? Her freed breast in moonlight, the crickets are silent. Your breasts free from your shirt, your face, your eyes, your eyes, you know me. Glistening wet, desires arching back. You're lost inside a dazzling prism. I free you into this backyard night. Amazing night. Her nipples white as moons reflected in her eyes. With your lips parted slightly, no words, your breath, no words, your breath tells me everything. Her husking breath, trembling, naked. Everything you might say in one look, old as love, forgotten love squinces from a spring, too close for time to elapse. I want you. Desire's hand, soft as a butterfly, going for nectar. In age-old moonlight, your body, your limbs, with startling acceptance, wrap around my neck like a breeze folding around my body, like a breeze, your fingers delicate as silver chain around my neck, your hand, your lips, lightly your breath fills my mouth, your breath inhaling gently, full of me, your breath so near, your breath so far. Thighs trembling, milk thistle wetness. I love you bottomlessly like the Pacific reaching through unseen, filling the Atlantic. You've never left me, but I lose you. Stay while there's still time left, but you will fade. While there's still time left of you wanting me in the startled wetness between your legs, flushed with nectar, I chase you, you pause at the stream, then leap across, I follow. While there's time left in moonlight, I caress you, faithful and perfect, no other. While there's still time left between each heart beat. Broken coconut spilling milk, pure desire. This is a story about meeting a soulmate. Someone who, before I even saw her face, I heard her voice at dusk. And just hearing her voice stirred something inside of me. The first time we kissed, it sounds like a cliche, but it was my real experience that there was like electricity moving back and forth between our lips. She told me later that she almost fainted in that first kiss. This is a story about meeting someone who I didn't even know I was looking for, but I was looking for her. I was missing her, and I didn't even know it. And I don't mean missing someone like her who was giving me what she was giving me. No, I mean I was missing her, specifically her. This is a story about how all of that fell apart in a very dramatic way. But before it fell apart, she and I remembered our past life together. Before this happened, I already believed in past lives. I believed in them. I had left home at 15 to live in India with a meditation master. I stayed there for 3 years, and I had a lot of powerful experiences that opened my consciousness to a much greater reality. But when I came back to America, I found that my ego issues, my character flaws, they were all mostly intact. My experiences of higher realities had not, unfortunately, fixed everything inside of me. When I lived in the ashram, I adopted a lot of Hindu beliefs because it was a Hindu ashram. I adopted reincarnation as a belief, and I got lucky because it happens to be true, I found out later. I've had other experiences over the years that indicated past lives, some of them quite strong, but they still left room for doubt. This experience I'm going to tell you right now left no room for doubt. Not only did my partner remember our past life along with me, but we've had 3 other psychic people confirmed details about that past life that there's absolutely no way they could have guessed or could have used a cold reading technique. There's absolutely no way they could have come up with the same specific details that me and my partner both remembered. And in fact, one of those psychics told me that information in a reading that she recorded on a cassette tape. I have that cassette tape, and I'm going to play that for you later in this video. That should be fun. So anyway, here's the story. I was working at Whole Foods Market in Austin, right downtown, and there was a coworker of mine who is an awesome guy and very spiritual guy, and he knew that I was a spiritual guy, and he would frequently invite me over to his place to hang out and look at crystals, he said. That sounded dubious to me. It sounded kind of new age. I kind of discounted him. He said, hey man, you should come over. We'll look at crystals and, and do some spiritual stuff. Being somewhat arrogant, I always kind of thought, yeah, that sounds a little hippy-dippy to me, and don't know if I want to do that. He asked me several times before there was an evening when he asked me, come over after work. And I was like, yeah, I don't have anything to do, so I might as well. And who knows, maybe it won't be too hippy-dippy. I went over to his house. He showed me his crystals. It was interesting. He said, hey, do you want to look at auras? Auras is something that I started seeing when I was in the ashram, probably at 16 years old. In India, I started seeing blue light around things and around people, but also around things. And it just sort of suddenly started one day. Still see them. I don't see them all the time. I have to kind of go into a state usually to see them, and there needs to be good conditions for seeing them. So I said, sure. He asked his wife to sit in a chair in front of a white wall so that we could see her aura more clearly. And we were at the other end of the room, of his living room, looking at her. And as usual, I kind of defocus my eyes a little bit, and I just relax and I let the energy become visible. That's what it feels like I'm doing. And I started seeing that kind of pulsing aura show up around her body, and it's getting bigger. And that's what I usually see. It's blue. It's always blue, sometimes clear. And I'm seeing that. I'm kind of like, yeah, this is what I always see. Not that exciting to me. Suddenly I saw what looked like a blue star. A brilliant point of blue light went flying It appeared and shot off of her shoulder in an arc across the room and vanished. And I'd never seen that before. And when I saw it, without thinking, I went, whoa. And my friend, Philip, okay, I'll just use his name. I'm not going to give you his last name in case to protect his privacy. Hi, Philip. My friend Philip is just still staring. He didn't react to that star flying off her shoulder. But when I went, whoa, he went, blue star. I'm like, yeah, you saw that? And he goes, he's just still looking at his wife like this. He just went like this, off her shoulder. I'm like, yeah, what is that? First of all, I'm like, whoa, dude. My friend isn't hippy dippy, okay? My friend sees stuff. My friend is legit. He's got whatever that is. So I ask him, what was that? And he goes, he's just still staring at his wife. I don't know. Some people think they're spirit guides. I don't know what it is. That's when I completely changed the way I looked at Philip. Next, he said, hey, how about you sit in the chair and I'll look at your aura? So I'm like, sure. So I sit in the chair and he's looking at me in the same way, kind of defocused looking, just like I usually do. But again, Philip sees stuff more deeply than I do. I don't see the kinds of things that he saw in me next. And as he was looking at me, he just kind of said, you ever think you might have been a monk in a past life? And I totally thought I had been a monk. I had never told him that, but I had left home at 15 to go be with a monk, and I had wanted to be a monk. I thought I was gonna be a monk, and I still thought, even at that point after I'd come back, I still thought I was gonna end up going back and becoming a monk. So he asked me, you ever think you might have been a monk? And I was like, yeah, I think I probably was, and I've been told that I was. He goes, I'm looking at him right now. He's staring right at me, but he's defocused, and he's going, I'm looking at him right now. Really serious looking guy. And I go, yeah, that sounds like him. And Philip kept looking at me after he saw that monk, and he said, I see a woman. I'm like, a woman? Someone I knew in a past life? Maybe someone the monk knew? She looks sad. She's wearing a dress, and she looks sad. And I was just racking my brain going, a woman, who would that be? It never even a little bit occurred to me that it might have been me. Okay, that's the end of that chapter. So fast forward about a year, I'm still working at Whole Foods, but it's not going well. I'm burning out on the job, and I need a change. Not only that, but the house I was renting, I was told by the landlord that it was sold. So I was starting to look for a new place to live. And then I got called in by my manager at work because I had shown up late a few times. Not by a big amount, but 10 minutes here, 15 minutes there. Basically, we came to a consensus that I just wasn't happy there anymore. I didn't want to be there. And he said to me, if you don't really want to be here, just give your notice. And I said, you know what? You're right. I'm giving you my 2 weeks notice. So I given my notice, and I also had to move out of the place I was living. That happened at the same time, which was interesting. One night I get a phone call at the store, and it's my stepfather, which has never happened before. And I'm worried there's some kind of an emergency. And I'm like, yeah, what's going on, Frank? And he says, Ellis, I've got a proposition for you. I'm like, okay. By the way, Frank, my stepfather, is an appellate court judge. He lives in Houston with my mom. Great guy, now deceased. Rest in peace, Frank. But he's a judge, a well-known judge. There's a law school library named after him. It was weird for Frank to call me at my job at Whole Foods on an evening and say that he had a proposition for me. So I'm like, yeah, what's going on? What is it? I'm a little on guard because this is so weird. He says, I want to open a canoe rental shop. Frank is obsessed with boats, especially wooden boats. I want to open a canoe rental shop in Bastrop, Texas. It's a little tiny historic town about 30 minutes outside of Austin. I want to open this shop, and I want you to run it. And I want you to move to Bastrop, and I will rent you a place to live and pay you to run this shop. Frank didn't know that I had lost my job and that I was looking for a new place to live. He had randomly called to offer me a job and a place to live out of the blue. I said, "Thanks, Frank. That's really interesting. I need to think about it." Okay. And he said, "Okay." And so I hung up the phone. It was just a lot for me to process all at once. Moving to Bastrop, that's a little hick town, right? Do I want to live in Bastrop? Leave Austin, the epicenter of cool alternative culture? Leave all my friends? I mean, it's only 30 minutes drive, but move out to this place and run a river shop? That's what we called it, the river shop. It was a lot to take in all at once. I continued working that evening and was thinking about it, and I told my coworker what had just been offered to me, and I said, "Do you think I should do it?" And he looked at me and said, "Ellis, you don't have a place to live and you don't have a job, and your stepfather just offered you a place to live and a job running your own company. Oh, yes, of course you should do it." And so I was like, "Oh, okay, yeah, that makes sense." So I called Frank back and said, "Yeah, I would love to do that. Thank you." So I'm moving to Bastrop from Austin. Coolest town in the world at the time. Not coolest town in the world at the time. And okay, I won't say that. Long story short, I move out to Bastrop, one of the oldest towns in Texas. And it has one of those old main streets with old, really old buildings. And along that main street, it looks kind of like an old West town. We rented a place for me to live that was actually a little tiny shop that had a storefront right on the street. It had a bathroom and a kitchen. And another thing about Bastrop is that the Colorado River runs right through the center of town. The big, wide, placid river. And a developer had collected a bunch of buildings that he had moved to that spot. These buildings were all like when you're driving down a highway through the country and you see an old abandoned wooden house on the side of the road. Well, this guy had bought old wooden structures like that, and he had them disassembled, moved to this site, reassembled, and put them there, and he made it all look like an old West village. He had an old horse-drawn wagon, even more Old West than the actual downtown of Bastrop. We found a shop in that Old West village that had a slope right to the river. That became the canoe rental shop. And by coincidence, one of the shops right next to the one we rented had just been rented. There was a couple who wanted to open a coffee shop there, and they wanted their daughter to run it. Their daughter lived in Austin. So they'd called her and said, "Hey, we want you to move to Bastrop. We want to open a coffee shop and we want you to run it." Just like my parents had called me and said, "We want to open a river shop and we want you to run it." So at the very same time, by coincidence, right, that I had moved from Austin to run the canoe rental, she had moved to run the coffee shop. I was told that there was a girl who had moved from Austin who was going to run the coffee shop next door to me, but I hadn't met her. It so happened I was working on my shop, getting it set up one evening as the sun was going down, and I saw people in the coffee shop next to me that hadn't opened yet. Neither one of us had opened yet. I heard them talking and moving around inside the shop, and then they came outside the shop as twilight was turning into night. I couldn't see them. I just saw silhouettes over in a group talking. But I heard this one voice out of all the other voices. Didn't know whose voice that was. There's maybe 5 or 6 people there. But there was one voice. I heard her laugh. I heard her talking. And somehow, when I heard that voice, something just zeroed in on it, like a target locking mechanism. And I was just fascinated with it. There was something about it that stirred something in me. I didn't know what it was. And I couldn't forget that voice. It was many days later that I finally met the owner of that voice, and that was the girl who had moved there from Austin. She was about my age. She was kind of an alternative person like I was. A little bit punk rock, alternative, just like me. It was several days before I met her, but in the time that I heard her voice and before meeting her, I couldn't really stop thinking about that voice. I kept coming back to it, and it was like a puzzle I was trying to solve. There was something about it. And then I meet her. I was fascinated by her because she was so incredibly outgoing and engaging and socially fun. She was literally that person who a stranger would walk into her shop. Within minutes, it's like they were best friends because I got to give her a name, and I don't want to use her real name. We're going to call her Olivia in this video to protect her privacy. Olivia was someone with just an amazingly social personality. She could literally get the most reserved, introverted person laughing and smiling within minutes, faster than I've ever seen anyone do in my life. And I loved it. She had that effect on me too. Olivia had a boyfriend who had moved to Bastrop also. I'm fascinated by Olivia, but I'm keeping my guard up because she's got a boyfriend. And we hung out, the three of us, many times. I liked the boyfriend and I liked Olivia. One night when we were in the bar together, I was there with Olivia and her boyfriend and some other people. And I was doing a thing that I used to like to do when I would drink. I would write poetry on napkins, and it would just be stream of consciousness poetry. No editing, no filter. I would just write whatever my hand wanted to write. This is extremely TMI. Okay, so I'm about to tell you something that's a little awkward, and I'm going to do it anyway because I've already decided I'm just going to let it all rip. So I wrote a poem about Olivia, something like, I will bend you like red hot iron, and when you orgasm, you will cry like it's a funeral. I don't know where it came from, and I felt a little weird writing it about her sitting right next to me with her boyfriend sitting right next to her. But the weird part about it is that later, when she broke up with her boyfriend, he moved away, we got together and we started making love. Not only was it the most amazing sex that I've ever had in my life, but again, this is TMI. I feel a lot of trepidation sharing this, but it's just, we're all adults. So I'm just going to go with that idea that we're all adults. For some reason, every time she had an orgasm while we were together for that year and we had sex a lot, every time she had an orgasm, which was every time we had sex, after she had an orgasm, there would be this pause of 3 to 5 seconds. And then, despite her not wanting to, she would start crying. And it happened every time. She would start crying. I didn't know what this meant at first. There's a part of me thinking, wow, I just touched her so deeply that she's having emotions coming up and she's crying. And then, there's also a part of me that's worried, is like, is she not happy with this? So I had all these different thoughts about it. And I'd asked her, like, why was that happening? And she said she didn't know. I asked her if it happened with other men before me, and she said, no, it never happened before. But it happened with me every single time. And that's what I'd written on that freaking napkin. I've never written a poem like that before, where I said you're going to cry when you come. Like, that's such a weird thing for me to even think of, but it came true. And do I know what that means? No. It's just one of a series of just weird coincidences that kept happening between us, starting with both of us moving from Austin because both of our parents wanted us to open a shop at the same time right next to each other. It wasn't long before Olivia and I had a serious crush on each other, but she had a boyfriend, right? The thing is, though, that they were deeply unhappy with each other. They had been on the rocks for quite a long time. They'd gotten together when she was a teenager, I believe, and they'd been together 7 years, and they weren't finding joy in the relationship anymore. They had been discussing breaking up, him moving back to a different part of the country, and her staying here. So all of that stuff was on the table for them already when she met me. And then we fell in love. And so, yeah, they broke up. I don't remember now clearly, but it was either immediately before they broke up or immediately after she and I had our first kiss. And it's not really something I will ever forget. We're coming up on almost 30 years ago, but I can remember exactly where I was standing in that living room at that house when we had this kiss. She came into my house with me. We were standing in the corner of my living room, mostly in the dark. Oh, it's kind of weird to remember that. Just got hit with the feeling of it. And we kissed. And I remember that electricity, little tendrils of electricity like back and forth on our lips, which I'd never experienced before or after either. It was serious after that, man. She and I got together very soon after that. Making love to her was unlike anything I'd ever experienced before. I remember that we could lay in bed together after making love. This is getting a little awkward because if she sees this, it sounds like I still have a flame for her, and I just want to make it clear that I don't. I'm remembering something that happened in the past, and it's in the past. It's not in the present. I'm not longing for her. I don't hold a torch for her. I don't wish for us to get back together. We had our moment, and that's this story. In case she or someone in her world watches this video. We could lay in bed together and kiss for hours. Hours, literal hours. Like we would just be laying in a position where our lips could be touching each other. And somehow we could do that for 60 minutes, 90 minutes. I was fascinated at the time with how long we could do that because I don't think I'd ever experienced anything like that before with anyone else. I don't remember ever feeling interested in kissing someone for so long. It wasn't compelling enough to just sit there and kiss someone for hours, but it was with her. Somehow it didn't grow old when we were kissing. She was an amazing lover. I think she was an amazing lover on her own, like with anyone, but she and I had chemistry that was insane. I actually haven't experienced anything like it since then. And you know what, guys? I'm almost not sure that I really want to. It was kind of dangerous. It was kind of like a drug. She told me that she had seen me walking on the street before we'd ever met each other, before she realized that I was the guy who was going to be in the shop next to her. And she said that she almost fell in love with me right then. That when she saw me, she was like, who is that guy? I want to meet that guy. That's the guy I want to be with. Somehow she was just immediately magnetized to me. I was utterly fascinated with her. Her whole personality, her style, everything about her, the way it was to make love to her and kiss her, all of that stuff was off the chart, but there was something deeper to it than that. There was a moment we were laying in each other's arms and I was looking deeply into her eyes and I just recognized in her eyes, I saw in her eyes. You ever looked in someone's eyes and you see their mind? You see their like soul? You see them? You see who they are? I think this only happens if they remove the mask. We all wear these masks, right? Especially if we're out and about in town. Some of us keep the mask on even with our own spouse, and that's really sad. But at least when we're out in public, we wear this mask. And when we're wearing a mask, it's hard to see the real us. When you look in their eyes, you see kind of like this kind of thing. We were in each other's arms, staring at each other, and the masks were off. And I saw her soul, her mind. I saw her. And when I was looking at her, I just realized that I had been looking for her my entire life. I had been looking for her. And here she finally was. And I didn't really know what that meant. You know, how have I been looking for her? How could it be that I have been looking for her my entire life when I hadn't met her before? I didn't know. It didn't make sense to my mind, but I knew that it was true. I can't tell you what it was like finally having her in my arms. The person that I have been searching for, it felt like for so long, longer than this life. It's like being on fire and having someone finally show up with a bucket of water and putting the fire out. That's what it was like, holding her in my arms, having her be mine again. Finally, I want to say that. But it didn't last. Our relationship was troubled from the beginning, and of course it was. We were both in our 20s. She just broken up with a 7-year long-term relationship. She had no gap between that and me. There was no time for her to figure out who she was. She had entered adulthood with this other guy and then immediately went into this guy. And, she's a free spirit. She wanted to be free and go hang out with her friends and party and be that single woman. And I wanted her 24/7. I wanted to be with her every second. I was utterly in love. I didn't understand why she would want to go hang out with anyone else other than me. I was incredibly insecure with her. I've never been this insecure with anyone else. And I think part of that was because there was a part of her wanting to be free, but she was drawn in by me. And I felt that ambivalence in her. And I think there was a part of her that was overwhelmed by how intense our connection was. And so she would withdraw and sort of be hot and cold with me. One day she'd see me and she'd light up like I was the love of her life. The next time I saw her, her voice would be kind of flat when she talked to me, and her face, she wouldn't light up, and it was almost like I was just a coworker instead of the love of her life. And it changed constantly, and I didn't know which one it was going to be next time I saw her. And that put me into a state of constant stress and fear because, man, I wanted to be with her for the rest of my life. I wanted to have a family and a house together, and I thought I'd finally found my soulmate. But she kept pulling away, and that put me in God, I remember just driving in the car with her, like so happy to be next to her, but so scared, so scared of losing her. We were riding in a canoe on a beautiful summer day. We would pull the canoe over and swim in this beautiful river. We would pull over on some island in the river and make love. She would look at me with eyes, it was like she was trembling, just overwhelmed with love. And I would be looking at her and we would just be, bonded. But I remember this one incident. We were going down a canoe and I looked over and I saw a vulture. They feed on dead animals. It took off from the ground and it flew right past us. And the moment I saw that, I became possessed with this feeling of doom that I would never see her again, and I would be utterly heartbroken forever. And I don't know why seeing that vulture made me feel that, but terror of losing her rose up into my heart and just shook me like a rag doll. And I didn't say anything about it. Wouldn't have wanted to say something that creepy. But that fear never really left me. It would sort of subside, but it never really left me. And I always felt off balance when I was with her. And it is right as we were a few months into our relationship that I decided to ask my good friend, who I'd known from the ashram, who was extremely psychic and who had taught me to start using my psychic abilities, named Kelly. Awesome man who is now deceased. Rest in peace, Kelly. I used to talk to Kelly all the time on the phone back then. I'd often ask him questions and he would give me psychic readings. So I call Kelly and I'm talking to him about her and I ask, what do you think we were in a past life together? And by the way, Kelly lived in El Paso, 9 hours away. He'd never been to Bastrop. He didn't know anything about what any of it looked like. And he said, you guys were together in the Old West. She was a prostitute. You were her customer. You fell in love and your relationship was hot and cold. You wanted her to commit to you, but she wouldn't. So there was this back and forth. He basically, without having heard the whole story of what was happening, he described our same exact dynamic in this life. He also said we were together in the Old West. And when he's saying that, I'm sitting in an actual 100-year-old building that was taken from the Old West from some field somewhere. And so was her shop. So was the whole little village of shops. It was all Old West. And Kelly didn't know that. When he told me this, I didn't feel anything. It's interesting that I later found out he was absolutely correct, except for one crucial detail. But when he told me that, I didn't feel bells ringing. I didn't get any kind of inner confirmation. I remember my thought was, well, that's interesting that he said we were in the Old West because we met each other in kind of like an Old West village. And I thought, I wonder if that's the way karma works, that if you were in the Old West in your previous lifetime and you meet again, you'll meet in a similar themed place. But ultimately, he told me that reading, and I just put it on my shelf of like, maybe true, maybe not true. I don't know. It's so abstract, theoretical, and unprovable. I don't know if I believe it or not. But I did find it very interesting that he was describing the same exact dynamic that we had in this life, and I told him, yeah, that's exactly what's going on now, and I don't know how to deal with it. It happened shortly after that I was getting an energy healing, a spiritual healing. I don't know why, but that particular healing was one of the most powerful healings I've ever had. I got in touch with what I would call inner divinity. There's the divinity that's outside of us, the transcendent, faceless reality prior to the universe, when darkness is on the face of the deep. After the universe is created, there is a divine intelligence that permeates every part of it and unifies the entire universe. But there's another aspect of divinity that I consider to be our divine essence. Maybe it's what the Bible means when it says the kingdom of God is within you, or that God dwells within our heart. In a nutshell, there is an aspect of the divine that is in us and is part of us. And in this energy healing, that divine spark of God inside of me got really big and clear. The energy healer was able to somehow make that divine spark become big, and it just filled me up with that part of me that is the light of the divine. It was an extremely powerful healing, and it had two effects. One effect is that when the healing was done after an hour, I looked over at my pack of cigarettes. Usually after an hour without a cigarette, I want a cigarette because I smoked a pack a day. I looked over at that pack of cigarettes and went, ugh, what? Inside, the only thing I felt was revulsion. Dean hadn't done a healing for me to quit smoking. I don't know if he knew that I smoked, but in connecting me with that divine light that is me, not my ego me, but the deeper me, I looked at that pack of cigarettes and I recognized that smoking cigarettes is in some way me trying to dampen my own life force, my own vitality, that somehow cigarettes represent death. I had no desire for that. In fact, it felt disgusting. So I did not smoke. I stopped smoking. It was effortless. It was just coming from this alignment with that light inside of me. And the light doesn't want to smoke. And so neither did I. An interesting part of that is that I did not have any withdrawal symptoms whatsoever. And I had quit smoking several times over the years before that. And usually when I quit smoking, it was 3 days of feeling like I was losing my mind every time I ever quit smoking. But when I quit spontaneously because I tapped into this inner light, there was zero withdrawal symptoms. No physical symptoms, no emotional discomfort, no feeling like my mind is racing and I'm going crazy. It was absolutely like I never smoked before. So that was one result. The other result was that I could not be with Olivia. I recognized clearly for the first time that our relationship was not healthy. This hot-cold thing was abusive to my tender heart. I'm not saying she was abusing me. I'm just saying that dynamic was mistreatment. I want to make sure I'm making that clear. I'm not saying she was mistreating me. She was caught up in her own thing, just like I was caught up in my thing. I'm just saying that behavior, which I also played a part in, was a mistreatment of my open, vulnerable heart. And so it was clear that I don't need that. I don't need cigarettes to hurt me, and I don't need this relationship to hurt me. And so I broke up. I didn't see her for a week, but she kept communicating when we worked Our buildings at the closest point were only like 30 feet apart. So we saw each other every day. We lived in a tiny little town. She drove a red VW Bug with a huge white racing stripe. It's the most distinctive car possible. And I could hear it because those old VW Bugs have a unique engine sound. And I could hear her coming. And I saw her constantly. You ever try to break up with someone in a small town? It is not easy. It is not fun. As that experience of my inner light sort of faded and my ego seemed to grow and replace it, and as I continued to see Olivia constantly, and she was missing me terribly and was wanting to get back together and was promising me that she wouldn't withdraw and it wouldn't be hot and cold anymore, I gave in and thought, well, maybe things have changed. Maybe we went 2 weeks where we were super tight and committed and I was in pure heaven. And then it started again. And it was rocky. Some of the highest highs and lowest lows I've ever experienced in a relationship before. Now we've arrived at the point of the story where it gets really freaky and really interesting. My parents lived in Houston. They had bought a trailer for the canoes, and I was to go there and pick them up. My parents lived in a big high-rise in Houston. That high-rise had a policy if they had an empty condominium in the high-rise, someone who lived in the building could rent that empty condominium for guests to stay in. So my parents rented this big condominium in a high-rise that was completely empty, but we had an inflatable mattress and bedding and stuff from my parents' condo. So we had this whole place to ourselves. That's where we slept. We stayed there a couple of days, picked up the trailer, went out to eat with my parents, had a good time. But something happened, and this is where it starts to get really interesting. Something happened when we made love in that big empty condo. For some reason, I decided to be in a different physical position when we were making love, and this is going to get a little graphic. It's going to be a little TMI, not for children here. So normally, when two people are making love, one of them holds a man and a woman are making love, one of them holds their legs like this, right? And the other one is like this. And you know which one this is. That's the woman holding her legs open, and the man comes in like that, right? Well, for some reason, I decided to try something different. And what I did was opened my legs wide. And so she had her legs on the inside. I was on bottom, she was on top. For some reason, when I opened my legs like that and we were making love, I felt my body become female. I don't mean that I started imagining that I was female, that I was playing around with the idea of being the opposite gender. That's not what I mean. I mean, it happened automatically. That feeling that I was female rose up inside of my body without me thinking about it, without me imagining it. It just came up on its own, and it was really strong. And we were so bonded, so connected, that as that happened, I was looking into her eyes, and I knew that she was feeling it too. I knew intuitively that she was feeling like she was male, just in the same way that I was feeling that I was female. And so we made love like that without saying anything about it. We didn't mention it to each other because it was weird. This was late 90s now. We're talking 97 or so. The culture has changed a lot. It's a lot more accepted now. Gender swapping and all that. Anyone can suddenly become the other gender if they want to. Back then, that wasn't really a thing. Okay, I'm a Gen X guy. I was raised in a culture that told me that homophobia was bad. Being gay was just fine. I had lots of gay friends, but it was still a shock for me as a guy to feel like I was a woman, to play that other role, I wasn't playing it, it was playing me. It was just happening. That was a weird thing for me, and I was a little bit ashamed of it. I wasn't sure what it meant. And I think she was a little unnerved by it. So we didn't say anything to each other about it. I need to mention that also. It was super erotic. When we switched genders, Just from that simple change, it became super charged. We were both got really turned on. We shower, we get dressed, we go hang out with my parents, we come back afterwards, and we're alone in that big empty condo again with our air mattress. And guess what we want to try again? It had been on my mind the entire night. I'm assuming it had been on her mind because the moment we were alone, the clothes came off, we were looking at each other, it was on, right? And first thing I do is open my legs just the same way, and she comes in the same way. The same exact thing happens where the feeling that I'm a man evaporates, and instead it is replaced in every part of my body with the feeling that I'm female and that she's a male. Now, we're still having sex in the normal way. Just the leg position is the only difference, but that's all it took to trigger this weird gender swap. Freaky Friday, okay? And we go to bed and we don't say a word to each other about it. I'm laughing because the idea of like not talking about something like that is just humorous to me now, because there's no way I would let something like that happen without like talking to my partner about it. But back then I was much more inhibited and much more afraid of talking about stuff. And so I just didn't say anything, and I could tell that she was feeling the same way. This was weird for her. We were both really interested in it and drawn to it, but it was weird. Next morning, we have breakfast. I put the trailer on my truck, and we start the 2-hour drive from Houston back to Bastrop. At some point, after we're outside of Houston, we're driving through the countryside, I suddenly remember what had happened the day before. And I was like, hey, that was pretty hot. What happened yesterday, wasn't it? I'm trying to remember all of that. She said it was. And I said, it felt like I was a woman and you were a man. And she kind of looks over at me with a little bit of like a haunted look. Like she's a little afraid. And I said, you were feeling it too, weren't you? And she nodded. And here's where something mystical started happening in that Toyota Tacoma on the highway in Texas. I heard a thought in my head that was almost like a command. And it said, ask her what we were in a past life, and what she says in response will be true. So that's a weird thought for me to have. And I kind of like went, huh? I'm not going to do that. Should I do that? Why would it be true? And I heard it again. Like a command. It was so firm. It wasn't asking me to do this. It was telling me to do this. Ask her what you were together in a past life. What her answer is going to be the truth. So I was like, okay, I'll try that. And I said, hey, what do you think we were in a past life? And she said, I don't know. I was like, yeah, I kind of thought she might say that. She'd been brought up Christian, but also a lot of fear-based teachings around the devil. Anything mystical, anything too weird, she'd been told her whole childhood was the work of the devil. And so it was scary for her. So there was an inhibition around talking about spirituality going too far. My mystical experiences from India and other experiences, and the fact that I had a psychic friend, all that stuff, she was wasn't into it. So us swapping genders spontaneously, we didn't know what was going on, but it was possibly in that realm, kind of a weird spiritual mystical thing. But when I asked her about past lives, then for sure I'm getting into that Eastern stuff, which to her is scary. So I expected her answer. She said, I don't know, right away. And I said, yeah, I know you don't really believe in that kind of thing, but just for fun, if you had to guess, what comes to mind? First thought, what do you think we might have been in a past life? And she's like, I don't know. And I say, look, Olivia, I don't know why, but I'm getting the feeling extremely strong that if you say anything, if you just say what we were in a past life, that whatever you say is going to be the truth. And I said, just guess. And she says, I don't know, and I don't want to talk about it. And so we're driving along in silence, that kind of painful silence when you're having an argument and two people are not talking to each other and you're in a little truck together. I don't say anything more. I figured I'm not going to be able to get her to answer. But a minute, 2 minutes, I don't know exactly how long it was, she casually mentions, I always wanted to live in the Old West. And when I hear that, I go, Kelly said that we were together in the Old West. Kelly, my psychic friend. I'd never told her about that reading. That when Kelly said that we had been together in the Old West and she was a prostitute and that I'd fallen in love with her. I say, Kelly, wow. All the hair is standing up on my arms right now. I just got a wave of energy. I said, Kelly said we were together in the Old West. She looks at me and I'm looking at her. That's when, God, the hair, if I could take that out, I'm getting tingles and shivers. That's when something completely changed in the cab of that truck. And the way I think of it is a curtain just got pulled back. The cab of that truck was like a different energetic space after that. A curtain got pulled back and the veil, the wall between this lifetime and a prior lifetime when we were together in the Old West, that wall of forgetting or blankness was gone. And it was gone for both of us. Something had come in and removed it. And the way that looked in my mind is that my memory of this lifetime being Ellis went all the way back to my early childhood, where the memories became fewer and fewer as I go further back and younger and younger and younger. But instead of my memory stopping, it's like where it used to stop was at some kind of blank black wall where there was just nothing further back. That wall was like a curtain that was removed, or the wall came down, and suddenly my memory didn't stop. It kept going into an entire different lifetime. I honestly think there was other lifetimes in between this lifetime and that Old West lifetime. I know there was a monk lifetime in there, but I didn't see the monk lifetime. It's like the memory of this lifetime went straight into the memory of the Old West lifetime. And it was happening for her too. We both started remembering things. I'm trying to remember how this conversation went because it was really dramatic. She says, I always wanted to live together in the Old West. She kind of mentions it casually as if it had nothing to do with what I had just asked her. Then I turn and go, Kelly said we were together in the Old West. I think she says, I was a man and you were a woman. Sorry, I'm processing this like it's happening again almost. After she says that, it's hitting me that the reason why I felt like I was a woman when we had made love twice the day before is because I was the woman in that life. And I'm realizing that Kelly must have gotten it wrong. Kelly said she was a prostitute, a female prostitute in that Old West life, and I had been her customer, a guy. Kelly must have seen that, but reversed the genders, thinking, oh, Ellis being a guy must be the guy I'm seeing in the Old West imagery. And Olivia being the woman must have been the prostitute. So he switched it. And this kind of tells you the kind of mistake that a psychic can make. They may see an image correctly and accurately, but their interpretation of the image is where things are more likely to go off. So she says, I was a man and you were a woman, and I drive and I'm just processing that for a minute and I'm not saying anything. And then this feeling with words is like pushing up from my heart. And the words are, and I loved you with all of my heart. And I didn't want to say that, maybe because there was so much sadness along with those words. And I was very excited. I was up in my head. Mine is going a million miles an hour about this weird thing that's happening. And I'm trying to figure it all out because that's what I try to do all the time. but this very emotional, sad, almost like a woman's voice kept pushing. And I finally let it out of my mouth. And I said, and I loved you with all of my heart. Tears were rolling down my cheeks. And I got these images. I saw her as a guy with a mustache, which was weird. That I could see that we had a really hot sex life together. We had a really passionate sex connection in that life. So that was weird for me to see that, because it's like my identity as a man, as a heterosexual man in this life was just getting annihilated, right? In the weirdest way. I saw her or him with the mustache, and then I saw myself in a dress. I mean, I didn't see my own face, but I could see my dress. And as I'm driving, I feel myself shift into, I become a woman in that truck. And this time it is like 3-dimensional, full somatic experience. I literally feel breasts. Like I feel the weight of breasts pulling down a little bit. When the truck bounces, I feel like my breasts jiggle a little bit. I feel like I have a vagina. I'm driving a truck, man, wearing jeans and a t-shirt like I always do. But I swear to God, if I closed my eyes, I would think I'm a woman. If I looked, I saw my male body, but it didn't feel like a male body. And then I go, I wonder what my name was. I think this in my mind. I wonder what my name was as I'm driving. And I instantly hear in my mind, Katie. And right when I think that, Olivia says, I had a mustache. I haven't said to her that I saw her with a mustache. This is all happening really fast. I'm drawing it out slow, but this was happening fast. She said, I had a mustache. My name was Jim. You were Katie. So I had just heard in my own mind that my name was Katie in like seconds after she tells me that my name was Katie. And I said, I just remembered that my name was Katie. I just saw that you had a mustache. I feel like I'm turning into a woman. And then this anger came up in me from that past life. And I said, you know what I think? I don't think you were ever really going to marry me. You were just saying that to butter me up. And she said, how could I marry you? You were a prostitute. And I said, well, I'm not a prostitute this lifetime, so you better treat me with more respect. And she said, oh, I don't know what you're talking about. We had a freaking argument from a past life. It's almost like the argument that we had back then just like suddenly restarted in this life. Despite having that argument, we got really turned on again. Extreme eroticism. When we switched gender, or when I switched genders in the truck, I just felt so hot for her. Him. Her. I don't know. And like we had to pull over, man. Like my hands are almost shaking. We could not pull over fast enough. We got off the highway, drove down some farm road, pulled over on the side of the road, and clothes came off. Okay? Don't come knocking when the truck is rocking. Okay? And it was 100% I'm a woman, she's a guy in the front seat of the Tacoma. That was a hot moment. Once we had finished that and we kind of put ourselves back together and we're back on the highway, I could see, while that veil was still open, because it didn't stay open forever, it closed up, where I could see into that past life. At one point, I'm remembering this, she said, I wonder where we were when this lifetime happened. As soon as she asked that question out loud, she had the answer. And she said, we were in Texas. I don't know that she saw where in Texas, and I didn't see that. What I did see was, and this is where it gets a little vague for me, like I don't see it very clearly, is that for some reason she went away. She, meaning Jim in the past life. She went away, and I believe she was supposed to come back, or he, but he never did. I believe in that lifetime, Jim didn't come back because he was killed, or at least I maybe was wondering if he had been killed. I never saw it super clearly. It's not that I don't remember, it's that I didn't see it at the time. clearly. I knew that he went away, Jim left, that I was waiting for him to come back, and he never did. Whether he actually died or whether he just didn't want to come back, I don't really know. But what I know is that I was utterly heartbroken for the rest of my life in that life. I remembered pretty vividly being a female prostitute in the Old West. And so this was another big this was another kind of big what's the word? It was a difficult pill for me to swallow. I could remember having sex with so many men. Okay. And I'm really, really quite hetero, like I'm not bi, okay? Like in this lifetime. My preference for sex partners is 100% in the female realm. And I'm not attracted to males. And like even a little bit. Love men. Men are good. Love gay men. They're awesome. Actually, in many ways, prefer. I think I have a great time hanging out with gay men, but I'm not sexually attracted to them. Right? It was hard for me to remember being on my back with my legs spread open and having dudes on top of me, dude after dude after dude. That was intense, remembering that part of that lifetime. And I remember what sexism was like in that lifetime in some way. And friends, what we have today in America, when we call it sexism, our ancestors from the Old West times would laugh in our faces at what we call sexism today. I've researched that time period a little bit. During that time, if a woman wanted to travel alone, she needed a male chaperone. If she didn't have a male chaperone, then she needed written permission from her husband, her father, or her brother. Even if it was a younger brother, she needed to have a note. Otherwise, she could be questioned. Like, why are you traveling alone? You're a woman. That's just a sample of the kind of sexism that was the norm back then. It was so the norm that I don't know that people really even thought of it as being sexist. It was just normal. It was just what the way society was. I could remember being in that sort of society and what it felt like. What it produced in me is the feeling that I needed a man. That feeling is still, not uncommon for women to feel today. But back then, it was so much stronger, and it had so many more roots in reality, external reality. The fact that I was unmarried was shameful. There was very few things I could do in an Old West town to support myself, to make money as an unmarried woman, other than prostituting my body. I'm not saying I was a victim of men in that life. I don't remember being hurt. Maybe I was. I don't remember it though. But I remember feeling like I needed a man in order to make me a complete woman, and in order to make me whole and to save me. And I wanted that so strongly. And when I met Jim in that lifetime, not only did I fall in love with him head over heels, just remember looking through Katie's eyes at him and just finding him so charming, like all the charm. That smile he had, the freaking mustache, which freaks me out to think about. I wanted Jim to save me. It wasn't just that I was in love with him. Yes, I was. I wanted him to save me from being a prostitute. And yet, by the same token, that was a social obstacle for Jim because I was a prostitute. The irony is, in this lifetime, I had the higher social status in the classist framework, if you want to buy into that framework, which I don't. But she had been brought up very poor in this life. Here I was, fancy judge, stepfather. They bought me a new Toyota Tacoma. I didn't have any concerns about money. when my parents, who bought a house in Bastrop, they would come there on weekends and stay in their house. They would have parties with all lawyers and judges and upper crust people. So in this lifetime, Olivia felt a little insecure about her social status compared to mine, whereas in the previous lifetime, it had been just the opposite. That was interesting. Is that karma? Is that karma flipping things on their head so we get to experience the other side of it? I don't know. Could be. We finished that drive in silence because this had really freaked Olivia out. After we had made love on the side of the road, I tried to keep talking to her about it. I was so excited by this, what had happened. I kind of was coming back to being a male. The curtain kind of was being drawn back and I wasn't able to remember. Neither was she. Things were kind of returning to normal and I was super excited. I was mentally going 1,000 miles an hour. I was starting to connect all the dots. I wanted to tell her what Philip had seen when I'd gone over to his house to look at some crystals and stuff. But she shut me down when I was trying to talk to her about that because it was too much. It was too scary. She was worried this was the devil. We went back into a silence. We got back to Bastrop. She went her way. I went mine. First thing I do is call my friend Kelly, the psychic who'd said we were together in the Old West and she was a prostitute and I was her customer. I talked to Kelly on the phone. I said, I just had the craziest thing happen. And Kelly said in his usual humorous voice, oh, good. And I said, but first, before I tell you what happened, I want you to tell me again what you saw me and Olivia together in a past life. He said, once again, you guys were together in a past life in the Old West. She was a prostitute. Okay, I'm remembering another detail that I forgot. When we were in the truck driving, Olivia and I, and we remembered everything, I remembered that I'd had red hair. That was another thing I remembered about myself. When I looked at myself, I saw my dress, I saw my red hair. So with Kelly on the phone, after we gotten back, he's telling me the whole story. She was a prostitute, you were her customer, you were in the Old West, blah, 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 blah. And when he was finished telling the story again, I said, you got it all correct, except for one little detail. And then I shut up and I wait. And then suddenly I hear Kelly laughing on the other end. And he's laughing his ass off. And he's saying, oh my God, you were the prostitute. And I'm just like, laugh it up, buddy. Laugh it up. You know, like it's embarrassing. I was embarrassed. I was actually ashamed. I'm gonna admit this. This is very politically incorrect in today's society, but I felt ashamed or embarrassed. And I tell Kelly anything, but that's not something I just would have widely talk about. Like I had been a woman. And it took me some time to process that. What does it mean in terms of me being a man? Am I still straight? Does this mean I'm bi? Or will I become bi? Will I become gay? I had to process it, man. It took me a while to process it. And it was embarrassing initially. But Kelly was laughing his head off on the phone. I was laughing too. I was chuckling too, but I was also embarrassed. And I was like, laugh it up, buddy. While I was on the phone, I asked Kelly something I'd never asked him before in a reading. I said, can you see what color hair I had as the prostitute? And he said, yeah, it was a reddish, brownish color. I was like, that's what I'd seen. You know, it was red. Next, I call my friend Philip, the guy who said, come over to my house and we'll look at crystals. And then we looked at auras and he saw this sad woman in my aura. And I was realizing that wasn't some woman that I knew when I was a monk. That was me. He had seen me in my aura. I did the same thing. I told him something really unusual had happened, but I didn't tell him what. And I asked, do you remember that night I came over to your house and we looked at auras a couple of years ago? And he said, yeah. And I said, do you remember when you saw a woman when you were looking at my aura? And he said, yeah. I said, can you tell me what she looked like? It's really important to me. He said, yeah, give me a minute to pull it back up. And so he was silent on the phone. And then he said, she was a pretty woman with brownish red hair. I don't know why that just brought up sadness. She was wearing an old-fashioned dress, and she looked sad. reddish brown hair, brownish red hair. I had seen red hair. But I now had 3 people corroborating what I had just experienced. Olivia had seen it and had said things before I had said them, but I'd already thought them. Kelly had said it, called it out, months before, but gotten that one crucial detail flipped. Philip had seen it a couple of years before, the same woman in my aura, presumably the same woman. Seems really likely. There's one more person who saw the same thing. She comes later. So there's a spiritual insight that came to me during all of this, and I think it's a deep insight. While I was remembering 2 different lifetimes at the same time, like my memory held 2 different people as me. 2 separate people were me at the same time in my head. Not just in my memory, but in the way my body felt, my concerns, like that argument that came out of nowhere. I was 2 wildly different people from 2 different time periods with 2 completely different lives, and they were both in my head at the same time. So do you know what effect that had? Can you imagine what effect that would have? It's a really unusual situation, and so you've probably never tried to think of it before. The effect it had on me is that it became clear that I cannot be either one of these people. If Katie was me, then how could me now be a totally different person? It became clear to me that neither one of them were me. Because how could they be? If me turns into a different person, then what does it even mean, me? How can something that changes from one person to another be the person that I am? So when this was happening, it became clear that I was not Ellis either. I contemplated that. I looked at that. I turned my attention deeply into that. And what I saw was that neither Katie nor me, nor Ellis, were me. They were like a set of clothes that the real me had put on and then taken off, at least in the case of Katie. And one day, in the case of Ellis, the clothes will come off again. When I saw that very clearly, the question arose, well, what is the real me? If I'm not Katie, because she's dead, but I'm still here, and now I've been thinking that I'm Ellis, but I can't really be him because I was someone else also, so I must not be either. Who's the real me? I could not see the real me, but I could see his desk, so to speak. I got an answer when I asked, well, who am I then? Who's the real me? An image came into my mind of a desk, and there was a nameplate on the front of the desk, like people used to have back in the day. They have their little plastic placard that had their name etched into it. And I saw that I was the whatever that sits behind that desk, and my nameplate gets changed. It used to say Katie, now it says Ellis, but that nameplate is what changes, not me. I am that which is behind those changes. And what is that? I could not see it, despite looking really, really hard, okay? And I'm pretty good at looking. I believe the reason I couldn't see what I am is because what I really am is the looking. There's a quote, beautiful quote from the Christian mystic Saint Francis of Assisi, who said, "The one you are looking for is the one who is looking." The one you are looking for is the one who is looking. That's the experience I had. There's something in me that's seeing these 2 lifetimes, but I don't see me, and that is because I am the seeing. I am awareness. That's what I really am. And I put on the clothes of this body and that body, and I go through a lifetime where I believe that, oh, this is me, this body is me, and this person is me, and this life is my life, and these circumstances are affecting me, and I've got to change them and fight them and work for them and get this and get rid of that and all that stuff. It's just a game. And I'm only playing that game because I've forgotten who the real me is, that I am that awareness. So that was a deep insight that came out of this crazy drama. And Olivia and I never really spoke about that experience again. Some months later, we broke up. She'd gone back to her home state for a week to visit. We'd been on the rocks, like really at the end of our relationship, with the same up and down thing going on, and her going out partying all night with friends and me sitting on the front porch, chain smoking, wondering where she is, going out with guys. She went back home to her home state, came back, and we were supposed to meet. And this is so telling. We had a time and place to meet, and I heard that sound of her little Volkswagen Bug come chugging down the street. And I was excited to see her, and also kind of worried and sick to my stomach with nervousness, like I often was. All mixed together, all those weird feelings, intense feelings. And she came, she pulled in the parking lot, and I was getting ready to go walk over to meet her. And then she suddenly just backed out without getting out of a car, backed out, and then took off down the street. I was like, wait, what? Where's she going? And I jumped into my truck and pursued her. And she was hauling buns, and she'd gotten back on the highway, and she was headed back towards Austin. I basically I chased her down in my truck and was like, pull over. Like, where are you going? We had a plan to meet each other, and she pulled in and then split without getting out of her car. And we pulled over on the side of the road, and I didn't understand what had just happened. Like, where was she going? And I remember when I'm trying to catch up with her in my truck, I just remember this feeling of chasing her and her running away. It just hit me like, this has been going on for a year. Basically, in one way or another, her running away from me and me chasing her. Why am I doing it? Yes, she is the most incredible lover I've ever had. Yes, when I've looked into her eyes, it looked like I was coming home. But she doesn't really want this. That's why I'm chasing her. She doesn't really want this. She doesn't want what I want. Why am I doing this? So I pulled her over, so to speak, like I was a cop. And I got out. I go over to the window. She's sitting in her car, and I'm like, "What happened? Where are you going?" She's like, "Oh, I went there to meet you, but you weren't there." I'm like, "I was there. You didn't get out of your car." And then I said, "Did you see your ex?" Well, I could see it in her face, I could see it. And I said, "Did you see your ex?" I'm like, "Yeah." Like, "Did you guys have sex?" And she's like, she thought about it. I could see her debating whether to tell me the truth or not. And then she looked up at me and said, "Yeah." And you know what my reaction was in that moment? I felt a burst of just love. I felt a burst of love for her. And you know why I felt love? I think it was for two reasons. One is she just told me the truth. And I felt honored, even though it was not pleasant news, okay? But I felt honored that she had told me the truth. And when she told me the truth, from her heart to my heart, I just felt that burst of love, and I felt a release. Because some part of me just went, this is over. That's how I know it's over. It's really over. And I said, "Thank you for telling me the truth." I don't remember if I said it then, but basically that was the end. There was a little drama later. I'm not going to go into that one. She ended up getting married. They're still together. That's years ago. So they've been together a long time by American standards. See her on Facebook. We're friends. We met up for coffee once after that. She invited me. And it was really fun to see her. There was no flirty energy coming from her, and there was no flirty energy coming from me. I respected her relationship with her boyfriend. She was respecting her relationship with her boyfriend. And it was just fun to see her. But that chemistry wasn't there. And that was really weird for me. It was really weird to see her and it just be like I'm hanging out with a regular human being instead of this mythological archetype that I've been longing for hundreds of years or whatever. It was weird just for her to be a human. And it made me happy to see that I wasn't hooked. At some point after we were broken up, I had a dream of her. And in the dream, I was tending a tree in my yard, and the tree was the most beautiful thing you've ever seen. It was a strawberry tree, very lush and full and green, but all over it were massive strawberries, like this big. And each strawberry was shaped sort of like a heart. I later found out that the old name for strawberries was heartberry. In the dream, Olivia called me and invited me to a party. And so I left this tree that was covered in heartberries that was in my backyard, and I went over to this party where everyone was smoking and drinking and carrying on, and she was being super flirty, and I just kind of looked at the whole scene and was like, this isn't what I want. And in that dream, I made a decision. There was like this choice point that was pretty strong. And I was like, nope, I want the real thing. The real thing, the real love isn't like a drug. And it's not outside of us in someone else somewhere. That real love is in our own yard. It's us. That's the story of how I found my soulmate. You know, someone that I had this huge, unresolved longing for. Someone who I died in that lifetime, never giving up hope of being with them again. This unresolved, desperate even longing to be with them. We had a big karma, you could say, to work out. Karma being an unresolved desire. And we worked it out, and it was really, really painful and hard. I was doing cathartic release work at the time. I cried out so many tears. There was one time where I went through an entire roll of toilet paper, wiping my eyes and blowing my nose, just bawling for an hour. The deepest, gut-wrenching heartbreak you can feel, or I've ever felt. So there's a lot of inner work, healing work, that was very, very painful. But I processed it. I came out the other side, and I moved on. And I really just wish Olivia all the best, and always will. And I don't need a single thing from her. So the last part of this video, I'm going to play for you the reading that I got a few years after Olivia and I broke up. I moved to California. One of my dearest friends in the world, when it was my birthday, she paid for me to get a reading. She was, I guess you could call it a trance channel. At the beginning of the reading, she would close her eyes and her voice would change into a different accent. And she's apparently channeling a being who is, in the spirit world. So I've listened to this reading, and I have to warn you in advance, the sound quality is really bad, but I've added subtitles so it's totally easy for you to follow. This will be the third psychic person who confirms the exact details of that past life without knowing anything about it. I was getting a reading from this woman. I thought she was fake. Closing her eyes and using this accent. I thought it looked cheesy to me, even though I have done psychic stuff and I've even channeled myself, especially back when I was in the ashram, but I never changed my accent. I never had to close my eyes. When I had done it, it didn't look like this. And so I thought this was cheesy. And at the start of her reading, for the first 30 minutes of it, she was telling me stuff that was all so kind of vague that it could apply to anyone. I just wasn't connecting to what she was saying. And I was about to walk out because I thought, why am I sitting here listening to this when I don't believe any of it? And we're only halfway through and I have to sit here for another 30 minutes. I just didn't feel like doing that. And so I was about to say, hey, you know what? I'm not really connecting with this, and I just really would rather leave. And I knew that would probably be weird and awkward, but why sit there when I don't want to? But a little voice in my head said, Ellis, you've been wrong before. You can be pretty quick to make judgments about this kind of thing. Maybe you should test her first before you walk out. And the idea that came to me to test her was to ask about my past life with Olivia, to leave it super vague and open, and then just let her talk and see what she comes up with. And almost right away, she comes up with the same story. Prostitute, red hair. She calls it the Wild West instead of the Old West. She did the same thing that Kelly did. She inverted the genders. She must have, again, seen female prostitute, male customer, and then she assumed I was the male customer because I'm a male this time. Even though she's supposedly channeling this being, she still made that mistake. You'd think that the being would be able to see that I was the female that time. And perhaps it did, but when that information came through the mind of the channel, it got switched around. And I think that's just such an important thing to know about psychics, because I have done psychic work starting since I was a teenager. And I think we all have that ability. And I think as a planet, we're going to be moving into a new era where more and more of us are using those abilities that we all have. But they're not perfect, obviously. Otherwise, I would have won every lottery ticket that I ever bought, right? And I haven't, because seeing numbers, seeing a string of numbers is extremely difficult. I'll make another video about that, but even really good psychics, like in the Army Intelligence Project Stargate, the remote viewing program that ran for 20 years, they said that even their best psychics, and apparently they had really good ones there, were only about 80% accurate and 20% inaccurate. So I have never met a psychic, including myself, who is perfectly accurate. Every psychic who's giving someone a reading needs to keep that on the table. Because I have met a lot of psychics who think they're infallible, or who act like their reading is like the word of God. There can be no mistakes in it. And that part, that's just ego. Ego gets blended into genuine psychic abilities, just like ego gets blended into genuine science, because scientists have an ego. Ego gets blended into everything that humans do, including psychic work. When they're wrong, it doesn't mean psychic abilities are fake. It just means we're dealing with human beings, and everything human beings does has an element of error in it. And so the only part I think is really believable with this reading you're about to hear is the part where she says that Olivia was a red-haired harlot in the Wild West. How could she have possibly guessed that? She knew nothing about me. There's no way you just pick that up out of nowhere. But as she's talking about that past lifetime, she's blending me and Olivia, Katie and Jim in the reading in a way that I don't know how much of it is genuinely applied to me and how much genuinely applied to Olivia or Katie or Jim. So I can't really disentangle that part of it. She also said something like, at some point, Jim, who she thought was me, moved. She said that I left the coast of California and moved inland, but we weren't living on the coast of California. The reading that she gave me was happening on the coast of California, but the past life with Jim and Katie happened in Texas, and I feel pretty confident about that. She was saying I moved inland from the coast of California because that's where I was when she gave me the reading. So in this way, our minds blend in with genuine psychic information and kind of twist it and make it less reliable. But it doesn't matter, because the main thing I got out of this reading was just a third psychic confirming Old West, red hair, prostitute. Yes, she flipped it just like Kelly had done, but it was still an amazing confirmation. And I bet you if I kept going to psychics and kept asking them, what do you see? I bet I would keep collecting more and more confirmations. People would keep seeing the same thing, I bet you. I've thought about doing that just for fun. Now I can't do it because this video is going to go wildly viral, and so that will forever taint my ability to get any more confirmations. And when this reading is over, I'm going to wrap it up. Hope you got something out of it. It sure was a wild ride for me.
There was a woman that I was involved with a few years ago that was really, really intense, and I had a feeling with her that we know each other. Yes, the intensity match that intensity inside that you are wishing to get in touch with again. But you are needing intensity in a healthy fashion, not just acting out for the sake of intensity. You know, difference from drama and passion. Yes, you have been together before. In another lifetime, she was actually a harlot, the one. By profession. Made good money at it, but was not very happy about it. And you met her, you were a gentleman. Just to say you had money. And you saw her one day, and were quite taken with her beauty. She had red hair. Magnificent red hair. And very piercing eyes. And so, you found out where she lodged, and you paid a visit. She was a prostitute? Yes. But a pretty high-classed one. And you paid a visit upon her, and you decided that you wished to start seeing her. But you did not wish her to see others. You wanted her to quit her profession. And while she did not like her profession, she was not willing to give up what she felt was her security for the sake of being with you. She did not know you well enough yet. And she had decided she was going to be pretty independent because in that lifetime she had an abusive father. She did not trust men very much. And yet, interestingly enough, she made a profession of having men. In a sense, having them use her, only she decided that if they were going to use her, they would pay for it. You see? And so they did. Very high price, as a matter of fact. And so when you came along, she had mixed feelings about you. On the one hand, the part of her that was very gentle and wished to be able to let down and actually have a connection, to be willing to risk, to have love, to be genuinely loved. That part of her wanted to let down. But another part of her was not yet ready to do that. You were very concerned and a bit angry that she would not take that step. And you were not willing to share her at that point. You decided that what you wanted was what you should be able to get, and when she said, no, I'm not going to do it this way, you didn't know quite what to do. So you became angry. At some point you began to do what would now be called stalking. But one time you were peeping upon her, and you saw her with a man that became abusive. He was drunk. And you rushed in and you killed him. And then you had to leave. You had to leave town pretty quickly. Giving up everything that you had. You took some goods with you, some money, mostly in form of jewelry. And you left. You wanted her to come with you. She would not. Because she was frightened. There was something about your intensity which frightened her. And also, your future was now uncertain. So she was unwilling to take the risk to do something different. She was unwilling to take the risk of your love. But mostly she was frightened by your intensity. And if she cast her lot in with you, she was not certain you were a very safe being to be around either. Well, you just killed a man and you'd been shadowing her. Even though you saved her life, which she was very appreciative of. She was not certain she would ever have any breathing room with you. And so you left and you ran away. And the life you created was less abundant than the one that you left behind. You did not have as much wealth. In fact, you had to do some manual labor, which you didn't before. But you ended up fine, and you ended up in a position where you were actually able then to buy a ranch. You move from this west coast, and you move farther in to more of what was the Wild West. Not quite as wild at this point. And you bought a ranch. And you did meet a woman, and you settled down with her. And she was very sweet. But part of you missed that independence. And how to have the sweetness and the independence in the woman is what you were truly desiring. Whatever happened to the process? She died. She actually was poisoned. But not by a jealous man, by another woman. Yeah, she was so worried about a possessive man and losing her freedom. And it was a woman that ultimately did her in. It was still because she created the belief that she could not be loved, that her life would not be safe. It would be tumultuous, and indeed it was. She was not ready to take the chance on peace, and that you could have independence and peace, both.
Hope you enjoyed it. If you have questions or thoughts, share them in the comments. I've had some really amazing comments on some of my previous videos. And if you got something out of this video, share it with a friend. I know it's weird, but they might like it. All right, take care.